'cause it ain't buzzing. Little generator won't get that far when the motor's in a bad condition. You need these batteries charged, and I'm crying, please, please don't do me wrong. Driving my airplane now for you since I've been gone. I'm gonna get down in this connection, keep on tangling with these wires. Get down in this connection, keep on tangling with these wires. And if I mash down and hit your starter, then your spark plugs will give me fire. It's so tough on the fingers, this one, because it's da 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 da. It's not just one. It's da da da. It's so crazy. But that was pretty good. Oh man. like milk in a cow won't come. I feel like churning in a milk won't turn, and I'm crying. Don't get me wrong. And if you see my milk cow, baby, now, drive her home. I feel like milking in a cow won't come. I feel like churning in a milk won't turn, and I'm crying. Don't get me wrong. And if you see my milk cow, baby, now, drive on. Oh, my milk cow be rambling, a mile around. Oh, my milk cow be rambling, a mile around. How can you suck on some other man's milk cow when the same man in town?
What's the next verse?
Okay, go on, let me know.
Why don't you just tell me where I stand? He stole our love away. He stole our love away. He stole our love away. I won't let you deter my love. Okay.
Scooter introduced me to Doyle, and sent me his first album, and I was astonished that anyone in this day and age was playing that way. It was like, oh well, thank God, some young guy is playing like that. And apart from that, there was the singing and the writing. So I wanted to meet him as soon as possible. And when I came to LA to do the B.B. King album, I asked him if he would like to collaborate on just play on the floor, and we'd work out how to do it as we went along, I just wanted to meet him. And he's the real thing, I mean, the first thing I noticed physically was he had Lightning Hopkins tattooed on his arm. And I mean, that's a serious commitment for a start, and I just had tremendous respect for him from the word go. And he can play, he's a real player, you know, and there are only a handful blues players that are really the real thing.
When you say Doyle plays like that, what do you mean with that? What's that?
I don't know.
I
Okay,
don't know.
if you can't define it, it's the real thing. It's not like he plays from the heart, but he knows the genre, and I don't know how that happens. I mean, you can study all your life and still only know it intellectually, but he knows it from inside somehow.
He turns the guitar upside down, but he doesn't turn the strings.
But that's not it. That's not it either. Because I mean, that Stevie Ray did that, and so did Albert King. I mean, and it's not something he. This is something he does. I mean, he can play either way, I think, but it's something more than that. I mean, and yet at the same time, he played like I wanted to tell him when he first started playing with me that I thought he ought to know that I'd never heard anyone like him. Too, it's like it. You know, at some point, Stevie Ray stopped sounding like Albert King and sounded like Stevie Ray, and Doyle is the same. Nobody sounds like, he plays like nobody else, and yet it belongs in the genre. You know what I mean? It belongs in the genre, and yet it stands on its own.
All right, Mike. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you and how you came to work with Doyle and how you met Doyle?
I met Doyle about 3 years ago through a mutual friend, actually his sister-in-law, Wendy Melvoin, who I'd done a lot of session work with, thought we would be a good hookup. So I had told her that I was actually a big fan of Doyle's, and next thing I know, Doyle's called me on the phone about a week later saying we should get together and do some writing. And we hooked up, and immediately it was just instant chemistry. You know, I think we come from a lot of the same places musically, as well as personally, and right off the bat, you know, you get a certain feeling when sometimes, you know, you meet people and you just know instantly you're going to click, and Doyle was one of those type of people.
To have Doyle come in with the music that I envisioned myself doing anyway.
Right. Yeah, you know, I've always wanted to do a variety of different types of music. I never wanted to get typecasted in just one genre. And someone like Doyle is great because he's got a whole range of different types of influences and different types of things that he likes to do as an artist. So for me, it was a perfect match, a perfect opportunity to get to try different things that are maybe going to be more rock, things that are going to maybe be more R&B and soul influenced, and just mesh it up, you know. And Doyle's voice, as well as his musicianship, he can pull anything off. The first day, actually, that we got together and met, we just kind of hung out, maybe about an hour, talking about what we've been doing and getting to know each other. And then I had a little bit of an idea that I kind of thought might be cool for him. And so I played it for him, and immediately he started coming up with some melodies, started adding some chords, and it actually went on to be the song that Clapton cut for his upcoming release.
Who does Doyle remind you of? I know that artists hate to be put in a box, but I mean,
Right.
Did anybody, when you saw him sing or play, did anybody come to mind, or did you think this was just?
You know, there's not one particular person that I could compare Doyle to. I think he's just this amazing combination of all these great artists over the past, and I'd say everyone from, you know, Stevie Wonder, Bill Withers, of course Jimi Hendrix, and all the great blues players. You know, he's just got he's kind of taken from all these amazing artists from the past and made a completely new sound, a completely different approach, you know, and to me, he's his own voice.
Now, you've been focusing more on producing, correct? And rock songwriting. Songwriting is what you've been doing a lot of lately?
Yeah.
Or do you still play live, and how did you come to be on the Great Wall concert with Doyle?
Well, I remember Doyle telling me, you know, a while ago that he had a couple of shows coming up, that he didn't really have a band set. So I just told him, I said, if there's any opportunity that I can get to do some live work, you know, whatever, you know, let me know. And we did a couple things. We'd played at the Dallas Crossroads Festival, and we had a great time at that show. And the next thing I know, he called me up and said, I got this show coming up in China, which you don't hear every day. And he asked if I would like to do it, and really it was within a couple of weeks that everything had to be thrown together, and for me it was a no-brainer, you know, to get to, you know, come and visit a place that I had never been to before, see a whole other way of life. In addition, you know, witness an amazing monument, you know, with the Great Wall, and then get to perform. I mean, to me, it seemed like all the right makings of an amazing trip. So basically, we just pulled it together within a couple of weeks, and next thing I know, I'm up on the stage with Doyle at the Great Wall.
Doyle, let's talk about the Robert Johnson recordings and how that all took place in the historical place that you actually did it.
The Robert Johnson sessions that I did with Eric were was an idea put together by Eric because we were playing the whole Crossroads benefit, and everything was sort of tied in at the time to the Crossroads Festival with basically all of his favorite musicians and guitar players. So because we were stationed in Dallas for about 3 weeks, he wanted to go to the original place that Robert Johnson recorded half of the catalog that he did. So it was about 15 songs were recorded in this one warehouse room in Dallas, and somehow he got it. It had been converted into an office space. But when we walked in for the first time, there were all these little stickers on the wall that were from 1930, and it still had original memorabilia and things from that time that were still sort of hanging on the walls. So it was pretty eerie. And when we sat down to play, it definitely had this feeling of like we were intruding in somebody else's space. You know, like that building was chosen to be the place where they recorded that music, and that was sort of the home for that music. And but you know, Eric and myself felt like we were guests in Robert's house.
When you played Terraplane Blues, to be that technically proficient to play Robert Johnson and have the nuts to do that, I mean, had you and Eric rehearsed that at all, or did he just say step up and y'all did it?
You know, Eric is the kind of guy that, you know, when he gets it in his head to do something, he just goes after it, and he doesn't really care what obstacles are in the way. He doesn't think about anything. He just goes and he does it. So, I mean, he did tell me that we were going to do Terraplane Blues and a couple other Robert Johnson songs acoustic, and when we did that, it took me about it really took me about a year of learning how to play that kind of style. Because it's not really something you can accomplish as one guitar player, as me and Eric found out later. It's so hard to do because basically it takes two guys, because Robert Johnson had a style where he would play the melody and the rhythm on the top half of the guitar, on the top strings. He would also be playing the rhythm and bass lines underneath, and those two rhythms were completely separate from each other. So you had two different things happening, and that's extremely hard to do. I mean, it might sound to the average listener like it's very simple, but when you try and do it, it cannot be recreated. So on top of that, you have two completely different guitar things that you're doing. He was also singing in a completely different cadence on top of that, and it was free from both. So you had three different things you're doing there, and it took Eric and me to try and emulate it as best as we could, and I'm sure that Eric agrees that it still didn't feel like we accomplished what one man did.
I thought it was unbelievable. Let's talk about how you and Eric hooked up, and how did the whole process of the network of people that brought you and Eric together. Tell me about that.
When I got together with Eric, it was sort of a strange phone call because I was on the road with Roger Waters at the time, and the guitar player in Roger Waters' band was a man named Andy Fairweather Lowe, who also plays in Eric's band. But Eric didn't know that I was connected to Roger Waters in any way. So when he called me, he had just received a CD of mine, my second album, Jelly Cream. He received that, and he was in Japan touring, and he listened to it, and he found my number through my manager, who was a friend of his, who sent him the CD. and he just asked for my number, and sort of out of the blue, Eric called me and said, "Hey, this is Eric Clapton." And I think I told him to get out of here, like, yeah, whatever, man. And he said, no, really, it's Eric Clapton. I was like, oh, wow. And he said, you are my new favorite, you made my new favorite record in the last 5 years. He was like, you and D'Angelo made my 2 favorite records that have been put out recently. And he said, I'm getting back in a couple of weeks, and I would love to get together with you because I love these 2 songs in particular, Marry You and I Wanna Be. He said that he wanted to record them on a new record that he was making with B.B. King.